Hey everyone, Mike Miller with the Herald Times. IU basketball columnist Jeremy Price coming to you from Bankers Life Fieldhouse here in Indianapolis. Oh gosh, are they turning the lights off? No, alright, I think we're still good. We're still good. Coming to you after a 77-62 Louisville win over Indiana here in the something they're calling the Countdown Classic. First of three games between... They're really not turning the lights off.
They're dimming the lights.
We'll figure it out. Anyway, first of three games between these two programs over the next 3 years. This one, obviously, on New Year's. I don't know that the other ones will be. But anyway, this is going to be a thing now for the next few years. From an IU point of view, it certainly didn't get off to a good start.
No.
No, not at all. Worst...
you might could say Louisville turned out the lights on Indiana.
All right, thanks for watching. Yeah, no, basically, it was IU's worst offensive performance of the season. Defensively, I think... it
wasn't a good one there either.
No, really all around, frankly. Just not a very good performance from Indiana. I wrote in my story, I thought that they were just kind of indecisive in different ways. Jeremy, you kind of wrote about looking at this big picture-wise, yeah, they've lost two in a row, but we've come up here to Bankers Life twice now in the last 2 weeks, I think. First Butler, now Louisville, two non-conference games that would really be a nice measuring stick for Indiana, and in both cases they've fallen far short of where you'd hope they'd be at this point.
Yeah, I think those two games, the Butler and Louisville games, are probably the most accurate measuring stick of this team for this season. When you go back and you look at Kansas, obviously, first game of the season, neutral site, there's just the first game of any season is sort of its own thing by itself. I don't think you can put a whole lot of stock in that necessarily. Obviously, the North Carolina win was a good win, but it was at Assembly Hall where, well, Indiana beats top 10 opponents basically on a regular basis. Not to mention North Carolina was coming off the Maui trip. That was its first game back from Maui. Hadn't played in almost a week as well there, so I don't think you put a lot in that. I think you could even write off the Fort Wayne loss as a little bit of an aberration. Obviously, the team just wasn't there. OG Anunoby was sick. A lot of things going on there. And even this Nebraska game, if you want to write that one off as just one of those weirdo holiday unfocused performances, fine, you can do that. But if you want true objective evaluation, you look at these Butler and Louisville games, and the simple fact is that this Indiana team at this point is not good enough at this point in the season, especially at the defensive end of the floor.
Yeah. We'll start with defense? Let's start with defense. Yeah. We're already there. This is a Louisville team that, again, not a very explosive offensive team. Donovan Mitchell had a career-high 25 points today. He's the guy who's really struggling his last couple games. Actually came off the bench for the first time today against Indiana.
Yeah, maybe this was a bad game for Louisville for Rick Pitino to try and send Donovan Mitchell a message, because it obviously worked.
Right. 25 points in various different ways. Threes, getting to the rim, got fouled, went to the free throw line. Just kind of scored at will against Indiana. And here too was a situation too where guys sort of just got lost, and I liked what Deron Davis brought in spurts too, with some of the toughness he gave on both ends of the floor. But really, some of that toughness, that mindset that we kind of talked about this the other day, just the mindset of being tougher and allowing that to kind of influence physical toughness, just wasn't really there in complete spurts for Indiana today.
No, this team doesn't have it. In a lot of phases, they just don't have that cohesive, organic anything going. But especially in the toughness department, I thought Deron Davis was really good today. Got his first career start. I don't know that he and Bryant were particularly effective together today, even though they had been at times this season. But individually, they were, and maybe more than. I thought Deron Davis was really good, and he continues to make strides, which you'd expect as a freshman. I think maybe more problematic than anything else is where is Thomas Bryant at this point in his development. I think, he's obviously being relied on to play a different role on this team than what he did last year. Last year, so much of what he did was being able to play off of Yogi Ferrell and what he created offensively. Now we're looking at more post-up situations, more individual, more carrying the load type of situations, and he just doesn't seem quite comfortable in that position at this point, taking too long to make decisions. It kind of goes back to that indecisiveness thing that we've talked about. Just taking too long to make his moves. Not sure if he wants to shoot the jumper, not shoot the jumper, drive, not drive. The post moves, he's taken 3 or 4 dribbles instead of 1 dribble to make the move. Any number of things. And at this point, I'm not sure that it hasn't gotten in his own head a little bit even.
I was going to ask you before you brought it up if you thought he might be in a funk, and maybe funk is not really the right way to phrase it, but I think he's still trying to find himself as a player, and this is kind of a year and a half into his college career. Do you think he plays too high? I mean, he's always there are times I feel like I wonder if he's getting lost a little bit on the perimeter, maybe just not being used to his full potential.
Yeah, well, I mean, we could probably spend a whole segment, and maybe we will one of these days, on how Thomas Bryant plays. But on one hand, yes, he does play too high. He doesn't get down. He doesn't leverage the position. On the other hand, he doesn't play like he's 6'10" at times either. Mm. So while he's playing high and not leveraging the position, he's also not taking advantage of his length and going over the top of his opponents, taking advantage of that size. If anything, he plays down. He plays more like 6'7" sometimes than he does 6'10". So that's a bit of a problem. And he's a guy that, frankly, at this point, it's pretty clear that in some ways he's offensively more skilled for a face-up jump shot type of game than he is a back-to-the-basket post game, which is where De'Ron Davis is far more effective.
De'Ron Davis was really impressive today, just kind of coming out. And there were moments when Indiana needed the burst. They never really got it. But there were moments where he was playing very physical. There's 2 offensive rebounds. Finally just fought for a putback. About midway through the second half. But just in general, I mean, he kind of brought it against a Louisville team that really doesn't have a whole lot of qualms, just kind of bodying you up and playing a little bit physical. I think that was really what Indiana needed, not just in spurts, but from a lot of different guys. And at least from Davis today, they got it. Again, first career start, played over OG Anunoby, played alongside Thomas Bryant. You can debate the effectiveness of that, playing those two together. But this is the kind of game where they needed a guy like De'Ron Davis, and they certainly got the performance they were probably looking for. Except there were some misses. If you look at his field goal numbers, they weren't great. He definitely missed a few of them foot or two right in front of the basket, and he was angry too. You could hear him drop a few words after some of those misses. But by and large, though, I do think it was at least encouraging from an Indiana point of view. If you look at just what this day means in terms of his ongoing development.
Yeah, he finished 3 of 10 from the field. I know one possession it was miss, make finally. Another one he missed there late in the game. He missed the dunk. He was able to chase down the rebound, got fouled on that play. So 3 of 10, but already I can think of like 4 misses that basically he ultimately ended up with him getting points. So it just sort of hurt the average a little bit, but boosted the rebounding numbers. Finished with 8 rebounds, 6 of them offensive on the day. But his ability to basically take up space, to be a physical presence, obviously he's a very different big man than Thomas Bryant. And Thomas Bryant's so long and lean. De'Ron Davis takes up much more space, much more of a wide body, much more of a physical presence. And Louisville's big men were, for the most part, of the lengthy, skinnier kind, basically. So, he was basically the strongest man on the floor most of the time when he was on the floor. If Indiana could figure out a way to play those 2 guys together and play them off their strengths with each other, I think that's the optimal plan going forward. But it's hard to do that and then still find a place to put OG Anunoby and Juwan Morgan in that lineup. And so much of the time Indiana's playing 3 guards at the same time with the Johnson and Blackman, Newkirk, Jones, whoever. So I think there's a lot of lineup decisions to be made, a lot of rotation decisions to be made for this team going forward, and rather quickly to figure out what are the optimal lineups, what are the guys that give this team the best chance to win, because we're hitting into January here. At some point, you've got to put the focus on winning games, and if somebody's feelings get hurt, that's secondary.
Let's talk backcourt real quick before we wrap this one up. I think on one hand you could say this was a bit of an aberration. Robert Johnson went 1 for 13, I believe, from the field tonight. Obviously, he's not going to do that a whole heck of a lot. But on the other hand, I do think it is a little bit concerning. You still don't have that one creator, that one guy who can kind of lead you in and out of different situations, as we saw here today. There were times I just felt that Indiana really needed a voice there, and in some of the troubled or turbulent situations they found themselves in, where they were going a few minutes without baskets against some of that length, and playing against some of their own indecision. They just don't have that true creator right now. Josh Newkirk he didn't have a basket until 5 minutes to go, but even in the span in between, he just really wasn't, I guess, the type of guard or even point guard that you really need, or that could have created things, or at least guided you in a direction. We all kind of know James Blackman is who he is, but I think it's a little bit of a concern right now that you just don't have maybe that you're playing three guards, but you just don't have that one that you really need.
Right. It's kind of like quarterbacks, you've got three quarterbacks, but you don't have one then, basically. And Indiana's kind of in that position at the guard spot right now. I mean, obviously we know, like you said, James Blackman is who James Blackman is. When it's going well and he's knocking down shots, it's great. When he's struggling like he did the other night against Nebraska, 4 of 14 from the field today, 3 of 8 from the field, it's a little tough. Showed a little bit of mid-range game in the second half finally, which is what I've been looking for from him a little bit. But especially when you're talking Johnson, Newkirk, Jones, and Devontae Green, who didn't play today, was wearing the boot and sitting on the sideline instead. You've got to figure out what role those guys play. You talk about Josh Newkirk today. Josh Newkirk, it was like he throttled it down to eliminate the bad decisions and the turnovers, but then he really didn't give you much of anything else. It was just sort of stuck in neutral. It was Josh Newkirk light, I guess. And it wasn't hurting Indiana, but it wasn't really helping Indiana either. Robert Johnson obviously struggled shooting today. I thought a lot of his, especially in the first half, he was just rushing shots, trying to get it off a little quicker over that length of Louisville. And that's what Louisville's defense does to you. That length, even when it's not there, it's there because you're thinking about it in the back of your mind. So that was a problem. But, yeah, I mean, this team's got to figure out who's going to take the lead. I mean, in the second half, we had Juwan Morgan was basically running the point and arguably more effectively than any of the point guards were running the point during this game. And when Indiana went to the spread offense for a little bit there, spread the floor, kind of almost a four corners type set and running some stuff. Actually had some really good stuff, but when they went back to the more traditional offense, more of the pick and rolls, the weave, that kind of stuff, things got clogged up, mistakes got made, it just stagnated again, even though James Blackman didn't think it stagnated. I thought it stagnated.
I thought it did too. I just think they're a little too tentative far too often to be as good as they needed to be today to beat the number 6 team in the country, who, again, you're measuring Indiana right now going into, we're done with the non-conference going into the Big Ten season. Not a lot of great wins to be had in the Big Ten this year, a little bit down as a conference this year. This one would have helped. This one really would have helped for a number of different reasons. It would have been another great win to add to the resume. It would have been a nice jumping point into this conference season because, hey, you got Wisconsin on Tuesday, and you better bring it against them.
Big game.
Or else you're going to be scratching your head going into that, what is that, next game against Louisville? Or not Louisville,
Illinois next weekend.
And you got Maryland, a trip to Maryland after that. So it gets real here. You got to refocus. You got to get back engaged and figure out how you fix this one and set it back in the right direction. Again, gets right back in order on Tuesday at home against Wisconsin. Be a little bit interesting. No students in town. It'll be one more final holiday crowd for Indiana at Assembly Hall. I guess you could maybe say the Illinois game too. But anyway, you're going to need a good atmosphere. You're going to need a good game, more importantly. And we'll see if they can bring it. So we went long on this one, but thanks for watching. We'll see you back. We'll talk Monday. Monday. We'll talk Wisconsin. We'll talk basketball in general. Thanks for watching, guys.
See you in 2017.